Hello everybody, I'm Catriona Morten, I'm a sensory-motor psychotherapist. Today I'd like to do a little bit of myth busting with you about PTSD and trauma. There is a real consensus amongst particularly psychiatrists. I'm not saying all psychiatrists, but having worked in the NHS for 6 and a bit years, I know the mantra that was said an awful lot of the time, that if you've got PTSD or trauma, you just have to learn to live with it. You have to learn how to cope with it and kind of make peace with it. Learn how to incorporate it into your everyday. That it's not something you can get better from, or it's something that you have to take medication for the rest of your life and that will keep it at bay. That's not my experience at all. I've worked with many people who have had quite severe PTSD and have recovered. They don't have flashbacks anymore, they don't have triggered responses anymore. They are able to live a really free and easy life and recover and process their trauma. When we can process the trauma from the amygdala into our hippocampus, that's our library, our memory of things, then it becomes something that's a bad memory, but it doesn't take our nervous system out with it. It doesn't send us into a fight, flight or freeze, into a panic attack every time something triggers from it. We can process these things, we can massively widen our capacity for tolerance, for physical sensations, thoughts, emotions, so that things that would have previously triggered us don't trigger us. There's a lot of different ways and different modalities that you can use to really help you process the trauma. There's lots of things you can do with your body to raise its capacity and to bring more conscious awareness into what you're doing. Those things make a massive difference. It is not a life sentence. It's not something that once you've got it, you're absolutely stuck with it, because that has not been my experience. And it must be horrendous being diagnosed with something and being told that, well, learn to live with it, or you're going to be in this regime of medication for the rest of your life. Most people that I work with manage to either taper off, taper down, or come off their medication eventually and not suffer any serious side effects. It's not something that you're absolutely stuck with. It's not a life sentence. Another misconception of trauma is it's all in your head. You're imagining it, you're making it up. All you have to do is, get your thinking straight, reframe your thoughts, and that'll sort it out. It's, you're making more of it than you need to. When your nervous system gets switched on in a nanosecond and goes shooting upwards, pushing you into a fight, flight or freeze response, causing you to dissociate, that is not in your head, it's in your body. Your nervous system is threaded through your body. If you are having a panic attack, it's happening in here. If you're experiencing real terror and fear, it's here. You feel it. You've got all the symptoms of it. It's not in your head. It's a process that engages with your brain in order to switch everything on, but it's not in your head. It's a very real thing that people have a real experience of. Another real myth and misconception is all you have to do is talk about it. If you just get it all out and talk it through, all the gory details, then that will help, that will sort it, that gets it out. A little bit like if that thing comes up, just punch it out. If you're having a freeze response, you can't go to a punch bag and punch something out. And very often, if we're retelling our trauma, then we're re-traumatizing ourselves. It's not about the story, It's about the impact that that trauma has had on our body, on our nervous system. It is stored in there, in our little smoke detecting amygdala. And when it goes off, woof, we've gone off with it. And it isn't something that we can control. It happens to us. It's part of our survival mechanism. We have a trauma, we've survived it, and so the mechanism that we used to survive it, whether it was a freeze or a fight or a flight, we're going to recreate that every time because it works. Those things don't fade, but we can't just talk about them. It can help us get an understanding of what's happened and why, but it won't change anything physically or physiologically by just narrating it and talking about it. It can make things worse. If we're going into a therapy session week after week and telling the story, talking about the story, then if that helps, it's going to help really quickly and you'll know it. But if you're talking about a trauma, half the time you're not even going to get halfway through the story before you're completely taken out, that you're in a state of terror or panic, your brain's gone offline, or you're dissociated. Sometimes when we're having a debrief from something, it can help to talk it through. And if that helps in the aftermath of something, then absolutely people should be encouraged to do that. What happens after a really awful event is getting the right support. And for some people, that is talking about it, getting it out there and then, putting it into perspective, putting it into context. But you will know if you've been traumatized by something, because the minute something reminds you of that thing, your nervous system will go and your brain will go off with it. And it isn't something that you can just count to 10, take some deep breaths, because you haven't got access to any of those things. You wouldn't even be able to think to count to 10. You know, what a prospect for someone to have to keep going through and talking and talking. What I hear is that's often how people start, because maybe they'll go to their GP, they get a referral to a CBT therapist that can be very good in terms of putting things into context and having that relationship, having that sense of somebody being with you and bearing witness and validating what your story is and what your experience is. I am not taken away from that, but if you want to be able to deal with the physical effects of this, then you've got to be able to work with the body and the nervous system. And that doesn't involve talking, and often it doesn't really involve your head that much. It's your head observing what your body's doing, because this is where it's all happening. This is where all that activation, all that fear, terror, panic is going on. And we have to be able to work with this. And we can't do that by simply just talking about it, unfortunately. So I hope that's helped bust some of the myths about PTSD and trauma. And I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you have, give us a big thumbs up, subscribe to our channel below, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you. Bye.